Okay, good morning, Coalition. We are starting our Friday Facts, the first Friday Facts of 2024, and I'm playing double duty right now. I'm both welcoming you and we've got a great audience that's starting to come in and join us, and so I'm clicking buttons and letting folks in. This is great. So excited for you all to be joining us for the first Friday Facts of 2024. And we have such a wonderful new member of the coalition, someone who's been starting to get really engaged over the last few months. And so we were like, you have to join us. So we have Tara Muller, the policy attorney for Disability Rights, North Carolina. We're going to get all into Tara and ask her questions and get all into her work. But first, I want to put a few announcements since you all get gold stars for joining us. And you can get more gold stars if you join us next week. As a reminder, next week, Friday, January 19th, is our monthly meeting, first monthly meeting of 2024. And we've got great updates planned and our breakout out work groups. Sorry, that was fun to try to say. Uh, wow, lots of folks are joining us. Okay, I'm clicking admit. So, but our meeting, we also have a wonderful speaker. We have Dr. Julia Montoro Rodriguez. Lots of folks are joining. Dr. Julia Montoro Rodriguez from UNC Charlotte is going to be on to talk about the new caregiver TLC program that they've been running and evaluating. So excited to learn about their caregiver services and support and program next Friday. And then our second Friday Facts is just a reminder, since we've got a great crowd. Friday Facts is the second and fourth Fridays of the month. And so we have on January 26th, we have Carol Henderson. Some of you may know her. She's a writer and an author and does a lot of workshops for individuals with chronic diseases, serious illness, and we kind of put it as writing towards resilience. So with that, please be sure to join us for our next two Fridays, but I want to get all into this as I'm having fun letting lots of folks in. Wow, Tara, we are starting off our Friday Fact series. No pressure, but folks are really excited. So I need to turn it over to you. We have Tara Muller, the policy attorney with Disability Rights North Carolina. Tara, we are so excited you're joining us, and I'm thrilled that we have the Seviers here who really kicked off our Friday Facts, our history of interviewing great thought leaders and advocates around North Carolina. And we want to learn all about your advocacy work, but we have a history here. We always start by welcoming you and saying, take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what experiences shaped you into your current work.
Thank you, Heather. It is really exciting to be here. Thank you for having me. So my background is I grew up in Asheville. My sister and I grew up, had a great upbringing. My mom was a school teacher and my dad was a climate scientist for the government. So we grew up with a really strong sense of work ethic. My parents both put themselves through college and really impressed upon us the importance of working. My sister and I started working very early on and have always worked. My mom always had some side hustle in addition to her teaching job. And so we went to college with the knowledge that college was for finding a career that would be impactful and that would help others, not just for personal growth. And I went to NC State and have been in the Raleigh area ever since. So, and I was a Caldwell Scholar at NC State, which also really you know informed I think my worldview. That was it afforded me the chance to do all kinds of cool leadership opportunities and exposure to cultural events and things, groups of people and types of people that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to know. So went to law school at Campbell and was a litigator for 10 or 15 years before I landed in this job. And I also was a mediator for several years, mediating disputes in workers' comp primarily, so for injured workers.
Mhm.
Um, and I just could not be more delighted to be at Disability Rights North Carolina. I work with a tremendous group of folks who are so well informed and so dedicated to their work. So I'm just couldn't be happier than working here.
All right. Well, there's a lot there, and we're not skipping to Disability Rights North Carolina quite yet, because I am sort of fascinated. As folks know, I love stalking our guests, which is a more fun way of saying researching and prepping. And so I am curious about your journey into law. I think you gave a little bit of, you were sort of motivated to think about larger picture areas when you were undergrad, but what motivated you to go into law, and then your work as an attorney to kind of move from the litigation and appellate court work and into disability services? Because that's a great and impressive transition.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I say it's interesting because I went from having, representing one client at a time to representing, hundreds of thousands of people across the state of North Carolina, right? As in a policy role, my job is to look out for everybody with disabilities across the state. And it's humbling to be able to have that kind of a bird's eye view and be able to, to know that our work as an organization can kind of influence a bigger swath of people than I used to be. I enjoyed litigation, and I really enjoyed. I got a lot out of representing individuals. So I worked both representing small business owners, employers, and workers, injured workers. So both in workers' comp and employment law, and then becoming a mediator. And it was, I really enjoyed helping people in many ways, getting people into work, allowing people to continue working despite an injury is something that can be life transformative, not just to that person, but to their families, to their communities. As we all know, working, having that sense of purpose and that those goals can and being able to realize those goals um, can be transformative to the person, and I enjoyed that. But I did notice throughout litigating that I was, one way to say it is swatting at flies, right? I kept seeing the same big systemic problems over and over, and I would solve one problem with one client, and the same exact problem would pop up over and over and over. And so, this opportunity, when this arose at Disability Rights North Carolina, knowing that they work on a much more systemic basis, they have the authority and power to do what I could never do as an individual lawyer, right? Which is look at the big picture and the big systems and see what's going on there.
Yeah, so I think, all right, well, now let's dive into it. And I know I have all these questions, and when I'm sure other folks do as well. So tell us, it was really impressive, dare I say, intimidating to read about you and to read about Disability Rights North Carolina and the scope of the work you all do. It doesn't seem like a group you want to cross, because you are the amount of staff members that you have with the title investigator, which is so cool. So I want to hear all about your work with Disability Rights North Carolina and the kinds of services you provide. Oh, did we freeze up just a little bit? Karen, I see you're moving. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. And I've got the same issue. I see Tara as a frozen screen.
Oh, so do I. So she'll probably join us again. At first I thought that was me. There we go. Oh, all right. So she's probably going to join back in. But it's great to see everyone. And I'll tell you, I should have pulled it out on the right in the beginning. Oh, let's let Tara back in. The website is www.disabilityrightsnc.org. Is www.disabilityrightsnc.org, and it is a wonderful website and talks all about, and I see Tara's joining us again. Great information. Hey Tara, I was just giving a plug for your website. Great to see
Thank you,
you.
Heather. I am so sorry about that. I heard a giant bang and all of a sudden my internet went out. So there must be some construction around here. I'm so sorry, but have reconnected via my phone. So I think we're good for now. Apologize for that.
Not a problem. I was just doing a plug for your website because I was saying how much I enjoyed looking at it, and the impressiveness slash um, uh, intimidating. It doesn't seem like a group you wanna cross, especially as I was joking around. There's so many people with the title investigator on your team. And I thought, all right, tell us about the services that you provide and the programs that Disability Rights North Carolina. So we're all on the same page of the types of advocacy you do.
Sure, that's a great question. So, Disability Rights North Carolina is a federally mandated program, and it is part of a network called the Protection and Advocacy System across the country, the PNA system. Each state has one, and it started back in the 70s when Geraldo Rivera jumped over a wall and entered into a establishment that was a facility that housed men with intellectual disabilities who were being treated in an abhorrent manner. And so that drew attention to abuse and neglect and unnecessary segregation of people with disabilities, and the PNA system was started. So our system allows us to do all kinds of really important work. One core role is what you alluded to, which is the investigations and monitoring piece. So we are allowed to enter into any facility in North Carolina where people get services, people with disabilities get services. So that can be locked facilities, that can be, so that the media, we no longer have to rely on people like Geraldo Rivera to break the law and enter into facilities, right? We are allowed to enter into locked facilities. We're allowed to talk to the residents there outside of the presence of staff. We're allowed to take pictures. That information that we learn is not public. We're not allowed to disclose that, but we are allowed to report that to the authorities. And so that's what our investigations and monitoring team does. We go all across the state to, skilled nursing facilities, intermediate care homes, rehab facilities, schools, because children with disabilities get services there, jails and prisons, because 38% of people in jails and prisons have disabilities. And then we use the information that we find not only to report it to the state, but to inform our work in terms of what we then choose to do with it, right? So one of the tools in our toolbox is policy work, which is what I do, finding these systemic problems and addressing it with the legislature or with various administrative bodies within North Carolina. Another tool in our toolbox is our litigation, and our of course, we work really hard to address problems as much as we can that we see without having to resort to litigation. Sometimes it's just necessary, and sometimes that's the best way to go about solving these big problems. And so we do usually have several cases pending that end up. We're very selective. Obviously, when we do choose what to litigate, we choose cases that we think will impact the most people and address problems that are most pervasive in North Carolina. And we have been really proud of our work there that has really resulted in some positive change for a lot of folks with disabilities across the state.
Mm-hmm. I love.
And go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just going to say, I love the language that you've shared and you share on your website when it's so classy. When diplomacy is unsuccessful, you engage in carefully planned litigation. I love that when diplomacy is unsuccessful. To me, because I come from the aging and long-term care space, though as a coalition, we take a lifespan. So we've got pediatric all the way up. It does remind me a little bit of the ombudsman work that happens a lot where folks can go in and I'd love to hear more about that, but I know since you're a policy attorney and your work with policy, and since the Serious Illness Coalition is very really interested about how to make big picture change, talk a little bit about your policy work and your priorities, especially as we're going into the short session and we're going into a new year. What are the types of policies that you saw on the individual level, the needs that you said, hey, this is going to take a larger approach for, as you said, working from one person to hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah. And that's such a tough question for me to answer because our work is so broad, is so deep in scope that our work extends from education law to criminal justice reform to health to community access. And so it's hard for me to prioritize what we're always, but I can tell you that the bulk of our work involves making sure that people with disabilities are connected to healthcare. that they can access healthcare when they need it, and that access happens in the least restrictive environment possible. So you may be aware of a law called Olmstead that allows that says basically it's discrimination to require people with disabilities to have to go into a facility to get their care. So the least restrictive setting is what's necessary. And so we find often that people with disabilities are forced. What happens often is they go into a hospital because of a crisis or a rehab facility, and then they find that they can't be discharged, for example, because there just aren't adequate supports in the community to give them whatever they need, say 5 hours a day at home of in-home care, or wraparound supports, or even a community provider that has access, that has an appointment in the next 5-6 months, right? So we see people with serious illnesses who can't even get diagnosed or treated for a really long time. So a lot of our work focuses on making sure our networks are adequate to support the people in North Carolina who need access to services, because we know how vitally important that is to get connected to services. And we're actually launching a new initiative soon to draw attention to the healthcare workforce shortage in North Carolina that, of course, transcends all disabilities from all ages. It is just vitally important to draw attention to the fact that this healthcare shortage is affecting every aspect of life for people with disabilities right now.
Yeah, I know I had another question, but we're talking about the workforce. I'm curious about the initiative. Are you trying to encourage more people to join the workforce, or are you trying to change the compensation so that way it's a more attractive? I'm curious about the workforce, because I know it really does touch so many parts of both the caregiving and the long-term care of all ages.
Well, yeah, both. It's a complex problem, and it's not going to be solved overnight, right? And that's why so much of our work we involve coalition partners who have really deep knowledge about the way the systems work and how to change them. When North Carolina moved to a managed care system a couple of years ago, the premise behind managed care is that in exchange for a per member per month assessment of money, the managed care organizations would make sure that networks were adequate to provide care for people. And so a lot of our work involves holding accountable those who are responsible, but also looking forward and planning so that our pipeline of health workers is so we don't find ourselves in this situation again, because frankly this is we have reached crisis levels, and it's a preventable problem, right? It could have been foreseen. It can be, there are solutions, whether it be reallocating money, creating certification programs, creating licensing and professionalism programs that can be addressed now, to avoid this type of crisis again in the future.
I know we saw it coming. I was meeting with a family the other day trying to explain why there's a shortage of workers on the personal level. We saw it coming, and now we're here. I had a question. There's a few ways to go. You help folks get connected to services. How do people get connected to you? How do they learn about if I'm at home with a disability? How do people know I have a situation, I need you, or this is a problem, and what's the referral pathway that generally happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have an outreach department that goes all across the state, trying to inform people about our work. And we also have an intake and referral department. So we have a 1-800 number. It's available on our website that can provide information and referral. Some of those calls, we get more than 2,000 calls a year. So, and we only have a small but mighty staff of about 40 people. So we can't obviously take on each individual case. A lot of our work involves directing people to our website. Our website is really full of lots of self-advocacy tips and resources, but also we do sometimes, direct our folks, the callers, to our teams of attorneys who can help with individual issues. We also provide technical assistance to professionals like social workers, nurses, family caregivers who may need assistance, and we can direct them to that. Unlike a lot of legal service organizations, we do not have income requirements, limitations on our work, so we can help anybody, when we are nonpartisan and non-discriminatory in who we represent. So I would encourage anybody with a question to visit our website, to fill out a referral form if they can't find the answers on our website. The online referral form will get probably the quickest response, because that can go directly to our individual teams. And then we also have an emergency number for abuse and neglect in facilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say so glad, but that's a weird transition after hearing abuse and neglect. I'm thrilled that you have been coming to more of our coalition meetings, as well as the Caregiving Collaborative. I see Karen Appert, because it's wonderful to know about this resource and start to connect opportunities and initiatives together, because we do have a number of caregiving champions, and those that we all are connected to our different networks. And so to know that within serious illness, links to chronic disease, links to disability. So just to know that this resource is here. A question that came through directly to me is about this concept of mediation. I still love the term successful diplomacy or unsuccessful diplomacy. Talk a little bit about your mediation work. There was a question about, people are sharing that there's a need for more people to be trained as mediators. Is that accurate? Are you seeing that in your work?
Yeah, and I'm fortunate in the workers' compensation field that years ago, the courts made it a requirement that all workers' comp litigation has to go to mediation first. There was a great reluctance when that process started, right? Everybody thought their case was different than all the rest. Their case couldn't possibly be settled. And it turns out that it was a win. A whole lot, a huge percentage, and I wish I knew the numbers, but of workers' comp cases now end up being settled before they have to go to litigation. So that's a huge step in the right direction, and we see that in all aspects of litigation now in the civil arena. So as a mediator, my job was to hear both sides, right, and that's what I do in this job. Listen to why there are barriers, what each side wants, and then facilitate a real productive conversation that will result in a win-win for everybody. So those about 5 years I spent as a mediator really do serve me well in this role, as I'm talking to lawmakers and policymakers about ways that we can work through these problems and come up with a solution. And so often it's just a matter of not recognizing that we're all in this together, right? The serious illness overlaps with disability in so many ways. And I think so many people with disabilities don't see that. They see their one particular little segment of disabilities. And I will admit I used to be one of them, right? I thought I knew disability law because I had been a workers' comp attorney. I've seen lots of people fall off of roofs, and I know all about that little segment of disability law. And I think that's the case for so many people. They know, they have a child with, some serious illness, and they think they understand all the problems and needs of the disability community. But we are able to take more of a bird's eye view and see that we are all in this together, and we all have the same needs, especially when it comes to healthcare access.
Mm-hmm.
And the direct care worker shortage, right? And so it's my job to make sure people understand that we need to look at these issues as a whole, instead of figuring out ways that we are different from each other.
Beautifully said. Thank you. And there was a quick follow-up about the mediation. For those who are being trained as a mediator, do you need to be an attorney? Is there a role for non-attorney mediators, or do you need a JD?
It depends on the No, the short answer is no. In most situations, a mediator does not need to be an attorney. And it does depend on, in order to get on the court appointed list for certain cases, you have to have a certification that requires some legal training, but it does depend on the court. There are mediators, all types of different mediators. There are private mediators, there are court appointed mediators. I find that, having, in order to, at least in a lot of contexts, in order to get selected by both a plaintiff's attorney and a defense attorney, you need to have had some time in the industry that you are intending to work in, right? So that people know you and select you. But in terms of court appointed work, anybody who's interested in becoming a mediator, I would suggest to reach out to the Dispute Resolution Commission. They're a wonderful group of folks who can probably guide you into and give you information about how to start that process.
Well, that's super helpful, and I can see some folks even on this call that would be maybe wonderful doing that. Going back to, we were just talking about looking at the different populations, and it's really powerful to me and powerful for me personally with the coalition. Because I come from the aging space, thinking, that big picture about, as you said, if people can get in their own silo of just the one kind of disability. I know even within the aging space, dementia and cognitive changes and the social justice that comes around that. But there's so many topics. I am curious, I know we have just a few minutes left, and because your title is policy attorney, are there things that right now you are down in, well, you're in Raleigh. Are you at the General Assembly right now trying to, or soon at the General, trying to encourage passage of legislation or changing of legislation that you feel would be effective?
Yeah, that's what the bulk of my work is. Right now, we are between sessions, so I have a little breather, which is fantastic. I get to be here with you this morning. But yes, so the legislature works on a biennium, long sessions and short sessions alternating, and we just finished a very, very long session, and so we have a few months break before the short session starts up in March or April. So for right now, I'm not down there every day like I usually am. And it gives us time to kind of step back and do some big picture policy work, to work with coalitions and say, what's in the pipeline, what works in other states, what hasn't worked in other states, what kinds of planning can we do for next session, right? What bills did we support last session that didn't make it through, and how can we work with lawmakers and inform them, use this downtime in between sessions to educate folks about the benefits of certain legislation. And again, there's such a huge range, right? From everything from health to education to criminal justice. But we were very
curious
excited.
I know I was jumping in. I was like, I'm curious, are there a few bills that actually did pass that at least made it to the, however it works?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, this session, we were especially excited about the guardianship changes. So there was a huge bill, and that was decades in the works. And I wish I could take credit for it, but it was a lot of my predecessors and a lot of other coalition partners that worked so hard to get changes to guardianship, because so often we think if there is a disability, that person needs a guardian, period, a full guardian, full stop. And that, it turns out, is not the case. In many, many cases, once you get into a full guardianship situation, it's very difficult to go backwards. And so we were just delighted that after decades of work, that bill finally got passed this session, to create alternatives to guardianship, so that clerks now inform folks about their rights to things like limited guardianship and alternatives, so that people with disabilities do not find themselves in an overly restrictive arrangement. So that's one example. We also, there are lots of great things happen this session. Lots more to come, hopefully. And again, I want to give credit to all the partners that we work with, because we could not, we at Disability Rights North Carolina, say, nothing about us without us. We work really in hand with people with disabilities. We are people with disabilities ourselves. Almost all of our staff are, or support people with disabilities. And so I want to make sure that that we work, we don't do anything alone. We work really, really closely with the disability, people with disabilities, and also with subject matter experts in various other coalitions.
Well, this is wonderful. There was a request for links to your website. Thank you, Karen, for adding the website there for folks to be able to learn more about. I hate that we're almost out of time. I love, though, I'm going from hate to love. I really do love, and thank you for becoming more active with the coalition. Are there things right now that you want to make sure the Serious Illness Coalition members, since we've got a nice group with us, ways that we can be more involved in helping to promote your work and your efforts, are suggestions that you have? I'm rambling. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I already alluded to part of it, which is we're all in this together, right? Disability is such a broad definition, and most likely, almost all of your members, if you have a serious illness, you have a disability, and that entitles you to all kinds of rights that you may be overlooking. So I would say remember the broad definition of, an impairment, a mental or physical impairment that substantially affects a major life activity, and most likely that will trigger some rights that you may have for accommodations for employment, accommodations for health access, for transportation, for community access. So remember that broad definition and the fact that we are all part of this. We are all God's children. We're in this together, and we all need to be working together. And in that respect, I think it is counterproductive for us to do the othering that we tend to sometimes do, which is, well, my piece of the pie is more important than somebody else's piece of the pie. We need to start looking at it bigger picture. The pie needs to be bigger. The disability pie for all types of disabilities, for all types of health needs to be bigger. We don't need to be fighting among each other for a bigger slice of that pie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautifully said. I hate that we're out of time. I know I have so many more questions. I'm sure everyone does too, but I'm thrilled that you've become active with the coalition and active with the the caregiving collaborative. So we're going to hear and see a lot more of you, Tara. Tara Muller from the Disability Rights North Carolina. Thank you for kicking off our 2024 Friday Facts season. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Heather.